It would begin with the discovery of a 1972 Thunderbird parked in a neighborhood where it didn't belong. And it would only get worse when they discovered that the owner of the car had been brutally murdered in his own home. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of the Columbo family. Viewer discretion is advised. The Colombo family lived in Elk Grove, Illinois, and it consisted of 4 people. The dad, Frank, he was a successful auto parts salesman, and then there was also Mary, a stay-at-home mom. And they had 2 children. They had 13-year-old Michael and 19-year-old Patricia, but she would go by Patty. Patty, being the firstborn child, was treated like royalty. She was basically a princess to her father, and her mother absolutely loved her and loved dressing her up in beautiful little dresses, and it was just a happy little family. Patty would be spoiled, and they would just get her anything she wanted. The family wasn't super wealthy, but they also weren't doing poorly, so they were able to kind of do stuff like that for her. When Michael was born, though, when Patty was about 6 years old, things kind of changed. All the attention now was going towards Michael, and so all of this, like, being showered with, gifts and love and princess stuff kind of started to slowly go away. Frank and Mary were just all about their new baby boy, and that's understandable. This apparently, though, did not sit so well with Patty Colombo. As the years ticked by, many people close to the family would say that Patty seemed to be kind of resentful towards her parents and towards Michael, almost as if she was, kind of jealous of the attention Michael was getting. Patty did not feel like Daddy's little princess anymore. But at the same time, Frank and Mary, according to friends and family, absolutely loved Patty to death. I mean, they adored her still. They would always still make time for her. Unfortunately, I cannot find a ton of, confirmed background info on the family. I can really only find information primarily on Patty. And you guys know I like to talk about, the victims of the story. But in this case, I can't confirm most of the information that I've seen about the family. By the time Patty was in her teens and going into high school, she was considered to be like a free spirit, just sort of kind of doing her own thing, which isn't a bad thing. She was considered a very good-looking teenager, and she would use that, her good looks, to sort of get the things she wanted from boys her age in school. Patty would basically become kind of like a wild child. She would be a bit promiscuous, unfiltered. She just kind of was slowly becoming a possible problem child, if you will. It actually got to a point where Frank and Mary seemed to be having a very hard time reeling Patty back in. And unfortunately, when she was about 16 years old, she decided to just completely drop out of school. And her parents obviously weren't thrilled with this, but they were getting towards that point where, kind of getting her to do what they wanted her to do was becoming kind of impossible. That being said, she did take a step into adulthood that when she dropped out of high school, she managed to get herself a job. I think she had a couple different jobs at one point, but eventually she would find herself behind the cosmetics counter at a local Walgreens there in Elk Grove, Illinois. Not too soon after she started working there, she started to break the law because she stole credit cards and cash and wallets out of a few of her coworkers' purses. And then she would go on her own little, shopping spree and just bought she basically purchased $1,000 of just stuff using someone else's credit card. This wouldn't last long because she would get caught. Her father ended up having to pay back all of the money that she stole. And Patty would end up getting a 2-year sentence. Basically, it was a probation sentence, so she wasn't put in like juvenile hall or jail or anything like that, but major slap on the wrist. And obviously, she lost her job at the Walgreens. Rewinding back just a little bit, though, while she was working at the Walgreens, she met a man that she had become very smitten with. His name was Frank DeLuca. Frank, who's also her father's name, so it gets kind of confusing sometimes, so I'll try to refer to him as DeLuca as much as I can. But he was a 36-year-old married father of 5 kids. He was actually also like a key holder at the Walgreens, so like he was like in upper management, but he was also a pharmacist there at the store. DeLuca had been working there since 1961, I believe, and then by 1972, that's when Patty started to work there, and so that's when the two of them met. DeLuca was not known as a very faithful husband. He was sort of like a playboy. He would be a ladies' man, if you will, and kind of sleep around with some people. And he actually had dated other, co-workers of his kind of on the side, all while he was married. And one of these employees would also... that he would date would be 16-year-old Patty Colombo. Again, he's 36, she's 16. Even while he was dating this child, he would still sleep around with other women. And apparently Patty was like, okay, that's fine. And she was doing the same thing with other guys. Love. It's beautiful, isn't it? Oh, man. This odd, illegal affair got even more brazen when Patty, in 1974, decided to move in with DeLuca and his still wife. According to DeLuca, later down the road, he and Patty would sleep together in the house in broad daylight, whilst his wife and kids were in the home, while they were like hanging out in the kitchen or outside playing. That's when they would find opportunities to go to Pound Town together. Ugh. Now, this whole time, Patty's parents, Frank and Mary, they thought that DeLuca was just like a friend, slash previous coworker, and that, their child was just kind of staying with them. But they would eventually find out that that wasn't the case, that he, that she was having a sexual affair with this older gentleman. And obviously they weren't too keen on this whole concept. It got to a point where especially Frank got really pissed off, understandably, and he said to his daughter, "You need to break this off, like yesterday." But it would be a year down the road when, in about 1975, Patty came running back to the arms of her caring, loving parents and say, "Oh, Papa, I broke it off with him, and oh, woe is me, I need my own place to stay in. Mr. DeLuca turned out to be a scoundrel, I tell you." And so, Frank, being the very caring and very loving father still, even after all of her shenanigans, got her an apartment, right? Not only did he get her an apartment, he was paying the rent for her. Full rent every single month. Because at the time, she didn't have a job. At least not a stable job. But little did Frank know, he was duped by Patty. He was duped bad. Because, as a matter of fact, her and DeLuca did not break it off. As a matter of fact, DeLuca told his wife that we're separating, we're going to be getting divorced. And she was like, "Oh, God, whatever, okay." And then DeLuca immediately moved in with Patty into this apartment. So now Papa Frank was paying not just for Patty's apartment, but he was also paying for this affair to keep happening. So one day, Papa Frank, would confront DeLuca and his daughter at the parking lot of the Walgreens where DeLuca still worked, but obviously Patty didn't. And he was like, listen, you need to get away from my daughter. You need to stop this and end this. DeLuca was like, whatever, Pops. This is in the 50s. I don't know why I made him sound like that. And so, according to Patty, her dad then pulled out a rifle, pointed it at DeLuca and said, you're going to stay away from my daughter. And then he took the butt of the gun and he hit DeLuca over the head, not once, but twice, bringing him to his knees. And then he said, according to Patty, quote, you're dead, motherfucker. Nice. Go, Pops. Because of this incident, Patty would actually get her own father arrested and thrown in a jail cell. But very quickly after that, she managed to say, all right, let's just drop all the charges and we'll call it a day. And then at this point, Frank is like, you know what, Patty, we're done. Me and your mother, we're cutting all ties off with you. We've had it with you. Good luck with your life. And for a solid year, Frank and Mary didn't see or hear from Patty or DeLuca at all. But in 1976, Patty managed to weasel her way back into the family. She came to Mom and Dad with her sad little puppy dog eyes and said, please forgive me for all of my wrongdoings, Papa and Mama. She said, me and DeLuca, we're getting married, and we're trying to start a life now, and we're trying to be, we're going into the land of adulthood. Even though DeLuca was already an adult for many years already, by the accounts of friends and family, Frank and Mary said, all right, listen, we accept your apology. You are our daughter, and you know what? We're happy for you. You're getting married. Congratulations. And there were rumors that Frank and Mary had already purchased like a very expensive wedding gift for them. And the wedding was supposed to be in June or July of 1976 because the divorce from DeLuca's wife was taking a while. That's when it would be finalized. But then an abandoned car was discovered. In the early afternoon of Thursday, May 6th, 1976, a 1972 maroon Thunderbird was discovered in a Chicago neighborhood, and it did not look like it belonged. It was a car that nobody recognized, and when police got to it, because there was a broken window, and it looked like someone had tried to either steal the car or steal the contents within the car. So police got there, they ran the plates, they discovered it was not reported stolen, but they found out that it belonged to a man who lived in Elk Grove, Illinois, and that was a man by the name of Frank Colombo. He lived 20 miles away from where the car was found, and he was nowhere to be seen in the neighborhood where the car was. There were no traces of him, and no witnesses said they saw anyone near the car. So the Chicago police called the Columbo family's house numerous times. They got no answers, however. No one ever picked up the phone. So the Chicago Police Department then reached out to the Elk Grove Police Department and said, here's the situation. We have this car. We're trying to inform the family. So Elk Grove Police takes over this scenario. They try to call the Colombos. Same thing. No one answers. So they decide, well, let's make a trip out to the house and see if we can reach them that way. So, the next afternoon, on Thursday, May 7th, at approximately 4:45 p.m., a police officer from Elk Grove would go to the Colombo house, and when he got out of his police car, he noticed something kind of unusual. There was like a stack of newspapers, just like the paper boy had thrown, and it looks like they have not been brought into the house for at least 3 or so days. And they also noticed there were no cars in the driveway. There was mail in the mailbox kind of overflowing a little bit. It just looked odd, like something just felt off about the whole thing. As he approached the front door, the big metal screen door basically was closed, but he noticed it was unlocked. But the front door itself was open. It was like cracked open a little bit. So the officer rings the doorbell, he knocks, he calls out their names, and in no situation did anyone ever respond. There was, I think, a dog in the house barking, but no actual person ever responded or came to the door. So the officer kind of did like a cursory check around the house. He looked, and there didn't appear to be any broken windows. There wasn't any signs of like a break-in or forced entry or a struggle having taken place. But something still felt off. So he contacted backup to arrive so that they could go in the house. And then backup got there. And so when he arrived, they both sort of calmly, with guns at the ready, walked into the Colombo home. When they did so, they would find the body of Frank Colombo lying on his back in the living room kind of near the staircase. He had been shot at least 4 times, and he was kind of in a pool of blood, and there was some broken glass around him and like this ripped up lampshade kind of near his body. He did have a small cut to his throat, and it looked like he had been beaten with something as well. He was obviously deceased. They went to check his pulse just in case, just to be on the safe side. They noticed that he was freezing cold to the touch, which would indicate that he's been dead for a while, at least. They then moved further into the home, and right outside of like the guest bathroom, lying on the tile ground, was the body of 40-year-old Mary Colombo. Her throat also had a small cut across, and she had one bullet hole right at the top of her nose, but right immediately between her eyes. She too was obviously deceased. Around her were also like, a pool of blood, but also some like broken items, glass, that kind of thing. They then proceeded to go up the staircase, and they noticed on, I think, one of the stairs, I believe, there were 4 teeth on one of them. And judging by kind of the position of Frank Colombo and the fact that he looked like he had been shot through the mouth, or in the mouth area, they believe the teeth were his, to indicate that his teeth were shot out when the bullet entered his head. They walked into the first bedroom they saw, and that was the bedroom that belonged to 13-year-old Michael Colombo. And lying on his back on the ground next to his bed was his body. He had been shot twice, once through the side and once through the back. He had also been beaten over the head with something, and he appeared to have been stabbed many, many times, like a ton. On a little nightstand next to kind of where his body was a pair of bloody scissors. So they believe that's what was used to stab him. And then right next to his body was a trophy just covered in blood, because he had blunt force wounds to his head. So not only was he shot, he appeared to have been beaten and stabbed tons of times. So he appeared to have, this was like overkill for Michael. So at this point, once the police officers clear the rest of the house, detectives are then called in. Detectives arrive, and their first sort of observation, other than the bodies, is that there is no signs of forced entry in this home. There is no indication that someone broke in, that this person probably was either invited in or just was able to walk in. And the house itself appeared to have been ransacked. There were drawers pulled out, cabinets were open, there was just crap all over the ground, as if someone was searching for valuable items. But the problem is, it looked like that, but there was like expensive, back in the 70s, like those little tiny portable TVs, they were in the house. There was record players. There was an 8-track player, which would have been very expensive back then. Mary had on a very expensive ring, and there was cash in the house. There was many, many, many valuable items that were just so obvious to anyone that none of them were taken. So they kind of began to decide that I think this was staged to look like a robbery, but wasn't actually one. Outside the home, they found a 9-inch kitchen knife covered in blood, and they also found a little steak knife covered in blood, and that was just sort of thrown in some shrubbery right outside the house. Police would question the neighbors to see if they saw anything, and no one can really report seeing anything truly suspicious or hearing anything. They did say that the Colombos had a 19-year-old daughter named Patty, who police confirmed was not a victim in the house. The neighbors said that Patty didn't really live with them, but she had been over there a lot lately. So, where is Patty at this point? Apparently a couple neighbors in the area had like Patty's phone number, so they called her to say what happened, and Patty was like, oh, Jesus, oh man, okay, I'll be right there. Like, she didn't seem to care. And she never actually showed up to the house, not once during this. So detectives had to convince her to come to the police station to just talk about some things, and she finally agreed to do it. And she comes in this scantily clad, outfit. She's very showing cleavage, and she's smiling and she's laughing and she's just flirting. She's flirting with the younger male police officers there. And she bursts into the police station and she said, "It's the mob, I tell you. The mob killed my family. My father, he ran a chop shop for the mob right behind his auto parts store. And, see, this is the 70s. Why am I doing a 20s voice? Yeah, she literally said the mob likely killed her family for whatever reason." Molly wants to say hi. Say hi, Mama. Here we go. Here we go. All right. You can tell a story? So, police would go on to investigate this mob theory, and they came up with nothing. There was no secret chop shop behind his auto parts store. There was nothing. There was no indications in his financial history or anything. No witness testimonies or statements that said, yeah, he worked with the mob. There was nothing. This was something Patty seemed to be pulling out of thin air. Right? You get it. You get it. You don't get it. You're a dog. You're a girl. All right. The coroner, who did all the autopsies, would determine that the family was killed sometime on the evening of May 4th around 11 p.m. Or up until the morning of May 5th around 1 a.m. So there was a small window of time where they believed that's when the family was killed. The coroner determined that Michael did in fact get the most brutality amongst the 3 victims. He wasn't just stabbed a few times, he had 90 stab wounds to his chest and to his neck. The coroner made note that the stab wounds were very shallow to indicate that someone possibly weaker had inflicted the stab wounds. They surmised that this may have been by a petite female, possibly may have done this. They also found a long strand of dark hair across Michael's body. That hair looked very similar to the length and color of Patty Colombo. This is just speculation, however. So at that point, they then start to forensically examine the car that was abandoned that they found. They saw that there was what looked like blood kind of near the trunk, but this is way before DNA was a thing, so they didn't really have anything. They couldn't really do much with that. But there was blood sort of on the lining of the trunk. And then in the trunk, they found broken glass, which they would later determine through forensic testing was the exact same glass that was a part of the broken glass items that were next to Frank Colombo's body, which belonged to a lamp. Hence the broken lampshade as well. So it looked like Frank had also been smashed over the head with this lamp and it broke. They also lifted several fingerprints and palm prints from the car, and they noticed something very distinct, that one of the palm prints, which they thought was the left hand, it was missing its index finger. So there was no print for the index finger. So we're looking for someone very unique who's missing a finger. The same day they were examining that car, police were informed that Mary Colombo's vehicle was found 5 miles from the Colombo house. It was her 1972 Oldsmobile 98. Based on witnesses from where the car was found, because it was in like a parking lot of like a condo or apartment complex, a gentleman told police that when he left his home that morning, there was no car parked next to him. And then when he got home later that evening or late afternoon, that car was parked there. So that car had been parked there sometime in the early-ish afternoon, early evening of May 5th, which would be a day after these murders all took place. They found more fingerprints in that vehicle, also missing index finger. So this was obviously a very unique individual. Several days later, on May 10th, 1976, the funeral was being held for the 3 slain family members, and cops, as they usually do, would have people go to the funeral because just to spot out any unusual persons. And there was Patty. Patty Colombo got there, again, very scantily clad, very promiscuous looking. She was laughing and smiling and cracking jokes with family while everyone else was crying and sobbing. And she was openly flirting with young male, friends who were there. Even though her boyfriend, Frank DeLuca, was at the funeral with her, she was still flirting with them. And then her behavior changed, like, instantly, where she went, "Oh, mama, papa," and she threw herself onto the caskets, and just started sobbing and wailing, and, like, her behavior just went from, like, crazy to crazier. So it was very odd. Apparently, Patty Colombo was really trying to fight to have the 3 family members cremated, but because of Frank and Mary's religion, this would go very much against it. So family would tell her, like, no, we're not doing that. They're going to be buried, and that's their wishes. So Patty lost that battle. But why would she want them cremated, I wonder? At this point, police are extremely suspicious of Patty. And then 2 days after the funeral, on May 12th, they were able to collect fingerprints from Patty, and they collected fingerprints from Frank DeLuca. And guess what? Frank DeLuca, on his left hand, missing his left index finger. He also had a part of his middle finger missing as well. Well, that's kind of odd, huh? Then, police interviewed known friends and acquaintances of both Patty and DeLuca, and this would include mutual friends from the 2 of them. They found out that Patty and DeLuca had tried to hire the services of 2 of their friends. That would be Lanny Mitchell and Roman Subinski, and they tried to hire them to kill the Colombo family. She told these 2 friends that her father had threatened to take a hit out on Frank DeLuca, so he needed to be stopped immediately. So they kind of laughed it off and said, okay, we'll do it. We'll do it for $20,000. And Patty was like, okay, fine. Yeah, that's fine. They didn't realize that Patty and DeLuca were actually being legitimately serious about this. Well, they alleged they didn't know they were being serious about this. One of the men apparently really had a kind of a crush on Patty, and he really wanted to impress her, so he kept going along with this and said, all right, well, I'll do this for the money, but also I'm going to need to have sex with you from time to time or all the time. And Patty was like, for Christ, okay, fine, whatever, just do it. So this guy would string her along for quite some time, basically having sex with her, and she was like, okay, when are you doing that? When are you going to do this? When are you going to kill my family? And he was like, soon, soon, soon. And they got to a point where Patty provided him and the other guy a full layout of the house. She told them the normal schedule for her father and mother. And then she said, well, you know what? You're probably going to have to kill my brother too because, he's smart. He'll figure it out. So just go ahead and whack him too. Wow. Jesus. Okay. God damn it. So one night, Patty was at her parents' home, and when she left a door unlocked so that the guys can come in. But the guy chickened out and he never went in that night. Apparently, this is something Patty had to do a couple of times, and one night her aunt was over at the house, and the aunt noticed that Patty left the door unlocked. So the aunt locked the door, thought it was kind of weird, but whatever. But yeah, she attempted this leaving doors unlocked a couple times, but the guy always never showed up. So Patty and Frank DeLuca, they tried to hurry it along by saying, my father has officially ordered a hit on DeLuca. That's going to happen now. Please, go kill my family. Obviously, this is a lie, but so the guy said, okay, I'll do it. But he never did. He never went into the house. He never killed the family. He didn't have the courage to do so, I guess. Oh. So Patty and DeLuca decided, well, then we're going to have to do it ourselves. On the evening of May 4th, 1976, Patty would talk to her parents and say, listen, me and DeLuca, we want to formally apologize for everything. Can we please come over and have a meeting? We'll have dinner, and we'll just clear the air, and we'll start from scratch. And so her parents were like, okay, let's do it. At approximately 10 p.m., DeLuca would get to the Colombo house. He knocked on the door, and Papa Frank opened the door. And he then turned and began to walk towards the staircase, and that's when DeLuca, from behind him, pulled out a .32 caliber pistol and pointed it at the back of Frank's head, and he just pulled the trigger and put a bullet directly through his head, which went through his mouth, which shot out his teeth. Mary reacted, but before she could do anything, DeLuca basically chased her down the hall and she had turned around briefly, and then he managed to shoot her directly between the eyes, which knocked her to the ground, and she died. Then Patty and DeLuca went upstairs, and Michael, by miracle, was still sleeping. And this is like one of the most evil parts. Patty deliberately woke Michael up, and she told him, hey, stand up real quick, buddy. Can you come stand up and talk to me? So he gets out of bed, he's tired, and he stands up next to the bed. And that's when DeLuca just takes the gun and shoots it in the side of his head. And then he shoots him again in the back of the head. And then Patty takes scissors that she saw, and she just begins to wail on her little brother. And then they beat him over the head with the trophy. They just annihilate this poor kid. They go downstairs. They then cut the throats of the mom and the dad, I guess, just to make sure. And then they also bludgeon them with items. Again, for overkill purposes, not really sure why. The couple then runs through the house and stages it and makes everything look like it was a robbery gone wrong. They even steal a couple little things that really no one ever noticed. They then basically eventually will get into both cars. They will drop both cars off in their places where they were found. They will throw some of the stolen items into one of the cars, and then they break the window. And their hope is that someone will then try to break into the car and find the stolen goods, and that's how the police will be alerted, and that's how the family will be found, and blah 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 blah. DeLuca at some point goes into his work at Walgreens sometime that evening. And he's there for a little while because he's doing that to establish an alibi. And he's telling his coworkers, I was here all night. All right, if anyone asks, I was here all night. You see me, I'm here. Later on, DeLuca would try to have two of his coworkers killed because he felt that they were not going to corroborate his alibi of being at the Walgreens. So he tried to hire a hit on them. He failed, but still, he did attempt to do it. In the days after the murder, because this always happens, I swear, DeLuca ran his mouth to friends and coworkers. He said, we killed blah, 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 and we threw the stuff in a nearby lake, like all the extra evidence in a nearby lake. And he just told everything. And so these people will go to police, obviously, and let them know about this confession. The evidence against Patty and DeLuca at this point, with physical evidence, circumstantial evidence, witness statements, it's overwhelming. So both of them would end up being arrested and charged with the murders of the Colombo family. Why the overkill on Michael? The speculation is because simply Patty was always jealous of him since he was born. Patty was just like not okay with the fact that he got so much attention, and she just couldn't handle it. So I guess she really, really needed to kill him. So they would go to trial, both of them. Both of them were found guilty and convicted. They would both get 200 to 300 years in prison. They also got an additional 10 to 50 years on top of that for solicitation to commit murder by trying to hire people to do it for them. But something about Illinois' laws, even though they had such an extremely long sentence, they could both technically qualify for parole after serving, I think, 12 to 15 years, which both of them had attempted to get parole. But Patty and DeLuca never really showed remorse early on for any of this. And finally, by 2014, when Frank DeLuca was up for parole again, he just told the parole board, and he was honest about it. He said, listen, me and Patty, what we did, and we did do it, it was horrendous. It was something, we're monsters for doing what we did. And I'm going to tell you right now, parole board, myself and Patty, we should never, ever be released from prison. We should die in our prison cells. I guess you have to respect the honesty at that point, right? So, as of 2022, both of them are still in prison. Both are very, very old at this point, and the likelihood is that we'll never get out and they will die in their prison cells. Let this go to show you, folks, that it's never worth it. Ever. Literally. Because you will get caught. Especially nowadays, with technology the way it is. I mean, this was back in the 70s and these people still got caught. So now, no, don't even try it. It's not worth it. But that is it for today's case. Hope you found it interesting. I'm not sure if you've heard of this one before. I had not heard of this one before, so I like hearing about new cases. So, at any rate, if you want to see shorter form cases from me, you can head on over to my TikTok, which is down below in my description. It's also in the link tree, which is down below as well. I have well over 2,000 different cases there that you could watch, so give me a follow over there. If you have any cases you want me to cover, please go to my link tree below, check my case list, and look for the names you want me to cover. If it's already on there, don't email me. If you do not see the name that you want me to cover, then email me at mikey@truecrimerer.com. Also, it's listed below, and then I can add that name to my list. Just give me the name, when it happened, and where it happened. That's all I'll need. And finally, if you want to support me in any way, if you want, I'm not pushy about it, but I do sell merch. Merch store is also in the link tree below. We sell t-shirts and hoodies, mugs and wine glasses and whatnot. Some of it can be customized. Some of it you can do rainbow font instead of the traditional font. And we are, I think, approaching, still trying to switch to a new website, and then the merch design, some of it will be kind of revamped. So, and my friend Adam makes it. He makes it all himself. He takes the orders and makes the merch, and he ships it. He ships internationally, by the way, so no matter where you are, he will ship it to you. And yeah, so yeah, that's it. We shall see you for the next case, true crimerers. So, ding, ding, ding goes the trolley, ding, 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 and then you're dead. No. Just no, that's not it. One day I will find a way to end videos. It is not this day.